All right, the next question. So the Chesapeake Bay Foundation called the 2016 Charles County Comprehensive Plan the most environmentally responsible land use guide in Maryland. Do you agree or disagree? And is this a good thing?
Peter Murphy will also be starting this question.
Thank you. I think the one thing that we want to keep in mind here, and you'll hear a lot about it, and I think this maybe is why they indicated that, is a watershed conservation district. I want to be really clear about that because there's so much misinformation going around about that and what that really means. As a government, we have a lot of things to consider. We have to consider our overcrowded schools. We have to consider whether or not how the congested highways. We have to consider our water supply. So when you make decisions, you have to address those things. The Watershed Conservation District addresses those things. It does, in fact, restrict sprawl development that contributes to all those things. However, you can still have commercial operations in there. You can still build schools in there. You can still build churches in there. You can have all sorts of economic development things because those don't add to the overcrowded schools. They don't add to congestion on the highways. They're not depleting our water supply. When you make these decisions, and I think maybe that's why they looked at it this way, you have got to look to the future. I'm telling you right now, I talked to a previous commissioner president some time ago, and I said, what are you going to do when we no longer have the water to support our population? And the response was, we'll just buy water from WSSC. That is a bad plan. We have got to look at ways to preserve what we have. And so my guess is that the reason that they consider this progressive is because we are looking forward. And it only does address the sprawl development. It does not address all those other things that I know people believe. It does not impact the commercial. It doesn't impact all of those, as I mentioned, all those different uses. There are pages of permitted uses within the WCD. It just means that you cannot build schools in areas where we don't have the infrastructure. I mean, build homes where we don't have the infrastructure for them. That's all that is. So my guess is, for the reason for doing that, it was looking forward, and sustainable growth is what we're trying to do here in Charles County. Thank you.
Next up is Brian Claus.
I am a member of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and I disagree with them. We all attended a candidates forum at the Chamber 4 days ago, and Commissioner Murphy shared with the Chamber that the Watershed Conservation District only affected, I think it was 500 properties, only affected 500 properties. That's a complete misunderstanding of the regulations passed against us. It affects every house in the Watershed Conservation District. An example of that is, say someone has a 1,000-square-foot home. They are now restricted to how large they can make their home, 25%. They can only put on a small shed. And oh, by the way, if that shed exceeds the 8% impervious surface, they can do nothing. Every property in the Watershed Conservation District is affected. The ability to put a pool, sidewalks, sheds, those types of decisions that you, if you own a home on just 1 acre, should be allowed to make yourself, not restricted by your government. That's not a neighborly government. That's not a government that is your friend. And that is why I disagree with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Thank you.
Henry Thompson will be talking next.
I believe the Water Conservation District was too onerous and proposed too many restrictions on the current homeowners, as well as the next generation who tends to inherit that property as well. I fully believe that there should have been less restrictions imposed, and that the portions of the plan may have been beneficial to the environment, but there were some components that created this one house per 20 acres, which originally it started out as one house per 3 acres. And the numbers just didn't work out. There were just too many restrictions on the current homeowners and the next line that would inherit those properties. So I disagree with the overall WCD plan.
Reuben Collins.
The question was regarding the actual 2016 comprehensive plan. The plan itself is an ongoing process, but there are two elements that I think should be critically evaluated. First and foremost is the impact that the present plan has on economic development, commercial development on the western side of the county. That was the main concern I had in my initial look at the actual plan itself. It severely impacts the ability of the western side of the county to grow commercially, and particularly as it relates to the Maryland airport, the area surrounding the Maryland airport, and what was done to the tech center in Indian Head, or just outside of Indian Head. The result, and when we make these kind of decisions as a government, we have to recognize that there's always consequences to a decision that you make. President Murphy emphasizes that this is an attempt to ward off sprawl, but at what effect and at what impact? All the decisions we're making in terms of zoning are severely impacting the Waldorf area, if you really think about it. And when you talk about growth, and when you talk about overcrowding in our public schools, those public schools that are overcrowded are in the Waldorf area. They're not in the western side of the county. And I think that needs to be emphasized. There's always consequences. There's always consequences that are a result of decisions that you make. Now, a conservation district in and of itself is not a bad thing. In most instances, it is fundamentally sound.